The SMART campaign is a set of 6 client protection principles. It's like the borrower's bill of rights, and it's a standard that's emerging in the microfinance industry in light of the fact that there's not a lot of government regulation or standard government regulation. There's a strong need for the industry or for the movement of microfinance, which is 10,000 microfinance institutions around the planet, to self-regulate and to begin to do something. So those 6 client protection principles start with avoiding over-indebtedness. Keep in mind, there's not credit bureaus in these markets that we work in, so it's very important that there's a way for each microfinance organization to monitor the level of indebtedness that every client has before they issue a loan. Second is transparent and fair pricing. You know, just like nutrition facts on a cereal box, we want to be able to, for clients who are illiterate or who might not be numerate, we want to give them a very easy way to understand what are their total fees and interest rates that they're paying for this sustainable service, and so that they can make wise decisions at the household level about which loan to take or not to take a loan at all. Third is about borrower privacy and data collection. Fourth is about fair collection practices. You know, there's here in the United States, there's the Fair Collection Practices Act that basically protects consumers over certain forms of aggressive, repeat calling or someone showing up at your house. Again, in much of the developing world, a lot of this infrastructure the regulatory infrastructure has not caught up to where the U.S. is at. So it's up to the industry to not only self-regulate, but to enforce. And fifth is basically provide clients a way to issue grievances. So if they're not happy with their loan officer, who can they call at the branch office? Who can they report to or appeal to kind of blow the whistle and say, look, I don't feel like I'm being treated fairly. So there's a set of basically principles that we believe, and many in the microfinance industry believe. Now in the last 24 months, 1,800 institutions as well as funders have actually endorsed the SMART campaign, the 6 consumer protection principles. And the next stage is to develop verification mechanisms for us to kind of audit each microfinance institutions against their performance on these 6 principles, and then work with regulators in country to develop a more robust regime of compliance. You know, a big question that's come up in the microfinance movement is what interest rate is too high and what is excessive profits? How much profits is too much profits? I think there's an understanding that we want organizations to be sustainable. The question is there a measure, is there kind of a level beyond which it feels exploitative? The way we look at it at Kiva is we actually have done a mapping of all microfinance organizations that apply to get onto the platform. There's 130 that use Kiva today. The vast majority are unprofitable. In fact, the average profit level of the microfinance institutions on Kiva is actually negative. They're not quite sustainable yet. But what we look at is we look at 2 things. We look at the interest rates, or really the APR that's being charged, and we look at the level of profitability. And then what we try to do is identify outliers where the interest rate seems higher than market and where the level of profitability seems higher than market. And in those cases, we really drill deep and go, is this an appropriate field partner for Kiva, or is it really not something that we want to work with and support? And so in that analysis, we've actually got moved kind of away from organizations that we feel didn't have a compelling reason to charge as much as they did, or we felt were retaining earnings for things that we didn't feel were kind of clearly being reinvested in social performance. We think microfinance is an incredibly powerful tool. We want to see sustainable organizations that last our lifetime. Perhaps the most important thing we can do, for example, in rural Sierra Leone, is to make sure that that institution, that fledgling institution that's trying to reach people who are unreached, is on our deathbed, still around and strong and employing people. And yet, we need to make sure that in some of these markets where there's not as much competition yet, that these institutions aren't exploiting this to charge monopoly rents on pricing. So I think of those Americans that actually have heard of microfinance, we often think that it's something that happens outside of the U.S. It's something that might happen in Bangladesh, for example. What's amazing is that there is a growing movement here in the U.S. That really needs to get a lot more visibility, not only from kind of potential clients in microfinance, but also the whole ecosystem of support, policymakers, funders, corporations that, with the financial excluded, and there's huge numbers of people who are financially excluded today, that there are real viable options there around getting access to savings, access to loans, access to other financial products, services, and education. And so what we want to do at Kiva, our top customer service question that we get, mind you, we get 50 to 75,000 people visiting the site every day, is how can I get a loan? I live in the US, how can I get a loan? And what we want to do is take that question, take that energy, and actually refer them to one of our partner microfinance organizations to help them get set up.